I would like to introduce you to our keynote speaker today. Laura Dill, D-I-L-L, comes to us with a very unique experience and perspective, and with honest and grit. And she has written a book, you see it on your screen. It's called Daughter, but it's about embracing the difficult journey of caring for a dying parent without falling apart. I'm not going to give away a whole bunch about what she's going to talk about today, but her experience is honestly something, even though I've been through this disease with my late husband and with many friends and many patients and many caregivers, I truly cannot imagine having both of my parents diagnosed with this disease within 2 weeks of each other and what that would look like. So I am 3/4 of the way through Laura's book. It's very honest, and there's many times where I come upon a part of it and I just go, wow, and it takes me right back to where I was at when I was caregiving for my husband, my late husband, Chris. And I encourage you all to actually read this book, get it, because it's raw, it's real. We all can relate to her book. And thank you, Laura. I just want to take a moment to say thank you so much for everything that you're doing. And we look forward to learning more about you, your experience, as well as your Slay Society. Thank you so much.
Okay, I guess this is my cue, right?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you so much for having me. Dylan, I'm like counting the supporters that you have with all those logos in one of those slides. And I don't know if anyone else did that, but there were 17 companies involved in this. And unless I miscounted, but that is mind blowing to me. And to see all of these people fighting for a like cause is just absolutely so huge and exciting. So I am really grateful to be part of this. Like Dylan said, everybody has a story, and I'm sure every single one of you has a story. And I was going to ask for a show of hands, but everyone's camera is off, so I won't do that. But so if you guys have your camera on and you've told your story, and I'm assuming if you're here, you are a caregiver or you've been a caregiver. If you've ever told your story and felt shaky about it, like it's not really happening to you, like it's an out-of-body experience, that's what I wanted to see a show of hands of. I feel like that right now, and I'm 3 years out. I have told my story hundreds of times. I have wrote it in a book. I've done presentations like this, and I still right now, I don't know if you can hear it in my voice, but I'm like, like I just feel like I'm gonna have a heart attack. So bear with me, because I do want to share why, well, not just why I'm here, but how I got here. It is emotional. I probably won't cry. I'm not a robot. I think I just don't maybe have a lot left to come out, but here we go. So there's a quote I love, and then I'm going to tell you my story. And this quote, and I'm probably going to botch this quote, but it's by Rosalind Carter. And it sort of qualifies humanity into 4 different groups. There are people who are caregivers, people who need caregivers, people who have been caregivers, and people who are going to need caregivers. So I think that sums up every single person on this planet, if we're lucky enough to have the honor of caring for somebody that we've loved, and if we're lucky enough to have the honor of being cared for by somebody that we love. So I want you to keep that in mind today, that what you're doing is excruciating, but it is the highest honor. And every day when you feel like, I don't know how much longer I can do this, that's okay. That is completely normal. And that is not in any way showing any lack of love or compassion for the person that you're caring for. So my story is, and who cares where I grew up, but just for formality's sake, I'm from Ottawa, Canada. I grew up here, born and raised here in this city. Both my parents are from this city. And I have one brother, and we just grew up in a very normal, average childhood family, nothing special or exciting about us. My parents divorced after 20 years of marriage. They divorced, and they were divorced for 20 years, although got along very well, and all came back together to be one beautiful blended family very well. And at their 20 years of being divorced, that anniversary, which every year I would message them and say happy non-anniversary to both of them. My dad started a bit of a cognitive decline, and you all know where this is going to go. Short version is, at the end of August of 2019, my dad was diagnosed with glioblastoma. And this came completely out of the blue. So we have a big celebrity artist in Canada named Gord Downie. I don't know if anyone American knows really who Gord Downie is. He's lead singer of the Tragically Hip. And for Canada, he is like our go-to name for glioblastoma. So when my dad was diagnosed, everybody said that's the cancer that Gord Downie had. I didn't know anything about what that was. We found out very quickly that this was terminal. We found out his prognosis was 12 to 18 months. And I have 3 young children. And I said to my husband, I'm going to stop working full time. And that's going to hurt us financially a lot, but I will never regret spending time with my dad. And if I only have a year left, I'm going to spend that time with him and not working, and we'll figure out the rest later. My husband's a financial planner, so this was very, very hard for him to swallow, but he did. He said, okay, Laura, whatever you need to do to get through this, we're just going to do it, and I support you. And so I decided I would work part-time, and I would take care of my dad, and I would help his wife. My parents were both remarried. I would help his wife to, just heard someone in my house, I think it's him. I would help his wife to care for my dad and give her breaks, and this became kind of my mission. And 14 days later, my mom, who had shown up every day at the hospital, worried about her, I was 37, actually I was 36, and my mom had shown up every day at this hospital and worrying about her kids and what was going to happen when they lost their dad, and knowing how close we were. On my birthday, when I turned 37, exactly 2 weeks to the day after my dad was diagnosed, so on September 7th, I said to my mom, I just want to have dad over and eat ice cream cake and embrace that this might be my last birthday I get with him. And she said, that's okay. We'll celebrate another time. You spend your time with your dad. And while we did that, she dropped of a seizure in her kitchen, completely out of the blue, landed on her kitchen floor and was rushed to the hospital and was diagnosed with 2 glioblastomas. And our whole lives just got even more flipped upside down. I now had 2 parents who would maybe only have one more Christmas and one more birthday if I was so lucky. And I said to my husband, now I'm going to not work at all. no income, no part-time job. I'll probably stop being a mom and probably stop being a wife, and I'm just going to go be a daughter. And he was like, okay, whatever we need to do this and get through this. And something that I always kept in mind was, how can I, the question of, do I keep working or stop working as a caregiver comes up a lot. And I always approached it as, what will leave me with the least amount of regrets at the end of the day? How will I get through this, not looking back and thinking, I wish I had fill in the blank? And so I decided to fully stop working and really step away from any responsibility I had in the world, to be honest, and just be there and be a daughter. And I moved my mom into my home, and I took care of her as her primary caregiver, and I helped with my dad as much as possible. And it was the most horrific, most profound, and most beautiful year of my life. And there's nothing that I would go back and trade it for. No income, broke, struggling to pay bills even still, and to catch up from that hole that we dug. And I would not trade it for the world. And in that time, I am fortunate enough to be mouthy and talkative and loud and pretty shame-free. And I posted a lot about our story, and our story was just bizarre enough that people paid attention to it. And so I ended up with more help than I can even tell you. And people were creating meal trains and dropping off gift cards and, anonymously at our front door. And I would come home and there would be a $500 gift card hanging in a little gift bag on my front door. And I would open it and I would drop to my knees and cry. And the next day I would come home and there'd be a $5 gift card hanging in a little bag on our front door, and I would open it and I would drop to my knees and cry. And it didn't matter what the value was. It was the fact that people who didn't even know us were showing up day after day after day to just lift us back up continuously. And so into our journey in the beginning of 2020, pre-pandemic, I decided I wanted to give that back to other people. And that the only way I'd gotten that far, and the only way I'd been able to not work, is because, quite honestly, I didn't put gas in my own car for probably 6 months. Other people paid for that for probably 6 months. We also probably didn't pay for a grocery order for most of that time because community stepped up and helped with that. And so I knew that not everybody was comfortable jumping all over social media and crying publicly and saying, hey, I need help. And so who's helping those people? So I started the Slay Society in 2020, beginning of 2020, as a small way to raise money and have that feeling for me of giving to somebody else, to say, hey, I covered your groceries this week, or here's $100 gas card, because I know when you're at the gas pump driving to the hospital, it feels horrible to think, why is this costing me money? This is costing me maybe years of my life. This is costing me my income. This is costing me my social life, my livelihood, my mental health. And now I have to fork out $80, $100 to fill my car. We're Canadian, so it's probably $100 here. But I wanted to give that little teeny piece of relief and soften the edge for somebody else. So we started to put little fundraisers together. We quickly were amassing so much money. I literally couldn't dish it out fast enough. And so the Slay Society was born out of this need to give back and to help caregivers and to know what it meant as a caregiver to have somebody else just show up for you. And that whether it was $100 or $2,500, which is what we currently give each caregiver, it's just something that lifts them up in the darkest moments when they cannot get their own feet. So I wanted to share that with you guys, how the Slay Society was born. And, my parents did pass away during the pandemic. The pandemic hit right after I started this charity, which we are now a registered charity in Canada. We've raised over $150,000 for caregivers, just to put back into the pockets of caregivers since we started. But the pandemic hit soon after that and did not, threaten to shut me down as far as running fundraisers, but I pushed through and did it anyway. And I suggest that that's what everybody does all the time, do it anyway. But it really threw an absolutely difficult, deep layer onto being a caregiver, with two parents in two different hospitals at that point, one palliative and one with a brain infection that he had contracted. I was splitting my days between two hospitals every single day, getting my kids to school, getting in the car, driving to the hospital, flipping over to the next hospital at lunch, caring for the second parent, and then going back and getting my kids, come home, dinner, homework, have a glass of wine, cry myself to sleep, repeat. And this was had become my really sad, somber pattern. And when the pandemic hit, that took all of that away. And here we were now with no access, two parents in two different hospitals and zero access to either of them, both of them dying alone and isolated. And my dad did pass away in April of 2020, right in the pandemic with this brain infection, unfortunately. And I was able to be there. I was the only person in the room when he did pass, and all I wanted was to be the only person in the room when he passed. And I was so grateful, as hard as that was, to have nobody to turn and hug and nobody to turn and say, it's okay, Laura. I'm just so grateful to be able to be there, at the end of his life, and to be able to walk him right to that big door, I guess. And in October of 2020, 6 months later, my mom passed away, and I had the exact same experience where I got to be there. So that's sort of the, the short version of my story. Where this gets even crazier now, and I'm not sure how you beat having two parents diagnosed 14 days apart with the same rare terminal cancer. But in March of this past year, my father-in-law was also diagnosed with glioblastoma. And so we are actually doing this a third time, which clearly is not in my book, and I might need another one called Daughter-in-Law. But we are starting all over, or have started all over. And luckily he lives down the street. My husband gets to be there a lot. He has the same doctor as my parents did. But the irony is, I've written a book on how to walk through this and keep your head high and your shoulders back. And I've started a charity that helps exactly the position that I'm back in now for the third time. And this statistically isn't actually possible for this to happen. I think the stats, Dylan, maybe you have a better idea, but as far as I know, there are 3 in 100,000 people get glioblastoma, and the odds of it landing in 3 of our 4 parents is not something that I think could have happened, but it did. So what I want to share with you guys is a whole bunch of takeaways, all I've written about in my book, but truly some of the key things that I found were just, gosh, I don't even know the markers of how I got through every single day. And I hope that this gives you, Dylan, if I'm talking over time, please like wave
I'll
me
let
down.
you know. No worries. You're good.
I am hoping that this goes far past me saying, make sure you take care of yourself. We've all heard that as a caregiver, people saying, make sure you take time for you, make sure you do things for you. And you think, how in the heck am I supposed to do that when I'm literally caring for somebody else? Like their life is almost in my hands, right? And if you're a sandwich generation like me, then you also have kids, and maybe you also have a relationship, and it's overwhelming to think, how am I going to put myself first in this? But I'm going to give you a couple really easy ways. And when I mean easy, I mean really so easy that it's silly. And one of them is that you have to go back, Dylan and I talked about this the other day, you have to go back to the basic of basics. So there's a few things there. One is going to be water. And that sounds like the craziest thing, but I had a morning where I got up and I put on a pot of coffee, and I'm waiting for the kids to get up and all the stuff, the chaos to start in my home on a school morning, and then get myself to hospitals. And I put on a pot of coffee, and while I waited for it, I thought, I'm really thirsty. So I poured a huge glass of water, and I chugged that glass of water back so fast. And I thought, I am severely dehydrated. There is no way I would have drank this huge 20-ounce glass of water that quickly. And it kind of gave me this moment of realizing that in the hospital, everyone's going to come visit you, and they're all going to bring coffee. Nobody's offering you, like, how are you hydrating, Laura? Did you get some water? Like, nobody's asking you that. They're all going to say, do you need another coffee? Do you want me to grab something for you? Do you want a coffee? And I was living on, I may as well have put it intravenously into my veins. I was living on coffee, dehydrating myself. My health was absolutely suffering from it. My mental health was suffering from it. I wasn't sleeping well. And I decided, of all the things in the world that I can't control right now, which is a lot, I can control how much water I drink. I can just stay hydrated. The basic of basics. I can fill my water bottle every day and take it to that hospital and be on top of that. And sometimes we just forget because life gets so crazy. Dylan, when you said being a caregiver sneaks up on you, yeah, but it also kind of slams you right in the face. It just gets dropped into your life out of nowhere. And there's no time for like, okay, how am I going to approach this situation? Very rarely with glioblastoma do we get a heads up like that. So water is one. Write this down, please. I know it sounds ridiculous, but drink water. Aim to fill your water bottle and take it with you every day, everywhere you go. The next one is actually breathing, because we never think about breathing. We just breathe. It's pretty easy until we don't. And we don't always notice when we don't, because as soon as we're anxious, as soon as we pull up to that hospital and we know I'm going to walk in and I don't know what I'm going to see, and I see a water bottle, and our heart rate speeds up, our breathing gets more shallow. And that not only has a lot of implications on our mental health and our ability to regulate our emotions, but on our actual physical body. When we're breathing shallow breaths, our back muscles, our rhomboids are tightening, everything is getting out of line. And so to just take a simple breathing exercise, and I'm going to actually give you one of my favorites. There are so many, but it's weird to consciously think about breathing, but you have to do it intentionally sometimes. So I would get to the hospital, I would sit in the car and I would do some breathing exercises before I would walk in. I don't think I have notifications shut off. I'm very sorry. But box breathing. Has anyone heard of box breathing? Okay, so box breathing is the easiest way to do this. And it's just sitting in the most comfortable, relaxed way that you can in that moment, whether it's your car, the couch in the waiting room of the hospital, you lying in your bed at night, and just breathing in a box formation for equal counts. So in for 4. Some people find it helpful to actually draw across, do the box shape, but you go in for 4, always breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth. And you have to breathe through your belly. We all kind of think like we do a big chest breath, but we really need to breathe. If you put your hands on your belly, you should feel your tummy expand. This is actually a good thing. I know we spend our lives trying to do the opposite, but we really want to like push that tummy out as we breathe in. So in for 4 through your nose, hold it for 4, out for 4, and hold that for 4. And this is one of the easiest ways I remember to do it, because there's a lot of different breathing techniques, but the box breathing is one of the best, just to help you calm yourself down and regulate your own mood and all of your own hormones in your own brain before you enter into a difficult situation, or if you're feeling particularly anxious. So breathing, water, and you got to eat good food. And that sounds so silly, and it's a lot to overthink when you're a caregiver, but it will save you from stopping at the worst drive-throughs on the planet. One day I ordered marshmallow pie. I don't even know what that is. I ordered a marshmallow pie and I thought, this is gonna be so great. What a treat. I deserve a treat. But the treat I deserved was probably like broccoli and some red peppers. But I thought the treat was a marshmallow pie. I felt like complete garbage after. It was a waste of like $6. Like, what a terrible decision. And we're going to keep making terrible decisions because we're just on the fly all the time. We're running through life, going from hospital or home or this appointment or that. So take minutes in your morning and grab the rainbow. Grab the rainbow of colors from your produce drawer and get some protein in your body. Pre-plan as best as you can. I know that sounds very basic, and it really, really is, but get good food in you, get hydrated, and start breathing. We won't even talk about sleeping, because Lord knows nobody's sleeping at times like this, and I could give you all the advice in the world and it wouldn't make a huge, huge difference. But okay, my second thing that I want to share with you is what I call the self-care myth. So we sort of touched on this. Somebody says, you know, I hope you're really taking good care of yourself, or I hope you're finding time for you. And you're thinking, that's hilarious. I can't find time for me. But I want to tell you that you're already doing it. What you're doing already is self-care. And what I mean by that is, I went to my therapist one day, and believe me, I had several and I needed them, and you should too. And I said, how am I supposed to do this self-care thing? I have 3 children. I don't have time to go to a spa. I don't have time for a manicure. I like, when would I do that? And now I'm doing a bad job taking care of myself. And she said, what is your favorite, quietest moment of the day? And I said, well, I drop my kids off at school, and then I go, you know, shouldn't do this because I don't have an income, but I go to Tim Hortons. That's our big coffee shop up here. And I grab a coffee, and then that 15-minute drive to the hospital with my hot, fresh coffee and the radio on, and the kids are out and I haven't walked into fire yet, is just so relaxing for me. And she said, well, then that's your self-care. Giving yourself and just allowing yourself to have that coffee and enjoy that time. And maybe you make your coffee at home and you don't spend the money like I do, but that is your self-care, Laura. And I wanted to just give you all permission to find your self-care practices in something you're already doing. Maybe you love gardening. I'm a horticulturist. Maybe you love gardening. That's self-care. Maybe you could wash the dishes, and as you're washing the dishes, you're just taking a moment to be mindful and feeling your hands in the soapy water and closing your eyes and maybe doing some box breathing. Don't drop the glass you're holding, but just try to be really still and in the moment. That could be your moment of self-care, because the reality is most days that's all you're going to get is a 10-minute drive to a hospital. You might not get opportunities for anything bigger than that. And to be told that you should be trying to only puts more pressure and guilt on you as a caregiver. Yes.
So Laura, I know that as a caregiver, everybody is told, take care of yourself. Self-care is important. And everyone is agreeing with exactly what you just said. There's just no time. There's no, what does that look like? I'm wondering, do you suggest to people that sometimes maybe we don't even know what self-care is? Sometimes we need to sort of just stop and jot down 3 things that we think self-care is for us, and then maybe focus on that. Because you know how it's a little frustrating sometimes when you're in the middle of caregiving and you keep hearing, you got to take care of yourself. It's like, well, I don't even know what that looks like right now. And I really can't take time for myself.
Right.
But what you're saying is you can and you should, and maybe recognizing what self-care is, first of all, to each of us individually might be the first step.
Absolutely. And I have a friend who, I forget how she words this now. It rhymes and it's great and I can't think of it, but it's a like raise your
Oh, right.
Okay. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. Yes.
And so she is the glioblastoma survivor, you guys, of 7 years. Okay. So we want to listen to this girl. Her name is Anushka. You should look her up online. She's fantastic if you don't already know of her. She's in San Diego. And it's why can't I think of it? High vibes list, basically. And maybe it's a playlist, a music playlist that really just like lifts you up. Or it could be, I mean, for me, very much, I love to be in nature. I'm a hockey player, so hockey is something that raises my frequency. So having a list like that you sit and intentionally take the time to make a list that you can pull from. So when you're just feeling, sometimes we feel at the bottom of the bottom and we just actually need to sit in that space and ride that out. But there's times where you're on your way to this doctor's appointment and you're at the bottom of the bottom and you think, well, how am I going to pull myself out of this and walk into the appointment with my mom, dad, husband, brother, and I can't feel this way and enter into that, right? So to have something where it's like 3 songs that every time you play them, you feel fired up. Or water, by the way, water actually raises your frequency. So drink your sip of water, or yes, have a list that you can take from, and that reminds you that some of those self-care practices you're already doing.
When you think of frequency, you're thinking about meditation, right?
No, I am
No.
thinking about your energy. Yeah, you know, when you feel just very low mood, low energy, and you're just like, I've felt like this the last 3 days. I'll be totally transparent. The last 3 days, I've had just a low ride, circumstantial grief, throw it all in there, but caregiving again. But it's been really hard to crawl my way back out of that. And so when you're in kind of those places and you just need to be lifted back up quickly, or you feel like I haven't really had any self-care time, whatever that looks like to you, it's more about self-love than self-care. Self-care doesn't have to cost money, and it doesn't have to be something you go make an appointment to do. But maybe it's journaling for 5 minutes, writing some thoughts out on a piece of paper you're going to scrumple up and throw in the garbage after.
I love what you just said. Maybe self-care is really self-love. I love that. I hadn't heard that before. That's awesome.
Yeah, it is. It is self-love.
I'm looking at the time. I want to ask you a question. Did you ever, during this experience, did you ever feel that anger that I know many of us have felt? And if you did, what did you do with that anger? How did you live through that?
I felt extreme amounts of anger, yes. But I don't know if this is what you mean. Was I angry at, the situation, or I'll be honest, my anger was directed to all the people in my life that weren't experiencing the same thing. I was angry at my husband that his parents were, ironically at the time, healthy and here. I was angry at any friend who would say, oh, my mom is having us over for Christmas and she's being annoying because she's micromanaging. Right. I was angry at anyone who got to spend summer at a cottage with their children and the grandparents. And that was really, really hard. And that was hard long after my parents passed away, actually, as well. And I think only recently have I come to let go of the idea that if I'm suffering, everybody has to suffer, because that certainly isn't true. And everybody has their story. And you know what? I can't tell you how many times I've said to someone, and it's funny, I write about this in my book too, but I'll tell my story. And I did this with a mom one day at soccer, my daughter's soccer. I met this new mom and we were chatting and it got brought up and I told her my story and she listened so intently and actively. And she just really gave me space to spill everything. And I spilled everything. And I thought, wow, I probably ruined her day. And then she said, yeah, I actually lost my husband recently in a helicopter accident. And I thought, well, I'm a jerk, and I'm not a jerk, but you forget sometimes when you're living in your own head. And I thought, well, I would relive my hell before I would do that. And my mom always said, if you took all of your problems, you put 100 people in a room and you took all your problems, you threw them in the middle, you would take your own back because you know you've survived that. You have equipped yourself and built the tools that you've needed to handle that situation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think everyone who is here has been a caregiver and works with people, and besides their loved ones, some of us work in a professional way with patients and families and caregivers, but also all of us have a personal caregiving experience. And that's what this whole important session is about. And I know that once you're a caregiver, and particularly once you've gone through a brain tumor diagnosis and a terminal brain cancer diagnosis with a loved one, you are forever changed. You do not look at life the same. And there are little blessings in all of that experience, even though it's incredibly hard. Oh, and you just look at things very, very different. And I do feel like you become, in many ways, more compassionate, but you also become less patient with other things that happen in life and other people's lives as well.
Yes.
Right?
Perspective is a funny thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I just want to thank you, Laura, so very, very much for joining us today. And Laura's going to be with us the entire time. Don't forget to use your chat box if you have a question or a comment, because we will be getting to those as soon as we can. We do have quite a bit of time today, which is beautiful, and we will continue to remain on our Zoom meeting, even if it's after 1:00 p.m. Pacific time, if there's desire, just so you know. I also want to say thank you to all of you. This is not required. Thank you to all of you, though, who are turning on your cameras, because it helps me see you and it helps me engage with you, and not just me. I think all of it, we're here together, right? And we're here about sharing and learning and spending some time together and gaining those tools that will help us go forward. And I just want to I just say thank you again for everyone who's joining us today. We have quite a large group. Usually it's a little smaller and a little more intimate. However, we know the need is great. So we're encouraged that all of you are joining us today. I would like to move on to our next, actually one more slide. I want to put up, Laura, your contact information also. Laura is available right there. There's her email address, and there is her Slay Society web URL, her website. So she is available for any of you to reach out to if you want to. She's available, and I just wanted to pop up her contact information. Laura, thank you so much, Laura. I'm thrilled that you're going to stay with us the entire time today. Thank you.